Printer Games, podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by
Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery.
Kristen. This has been a big, happy 3D printing week for me.
Awesome.
Like a lot of things scored into the win column this week, and
I like that.
I am, and I'm happy to talk about it. So, like, I'm definitely in the oh boy, I need more printers because I want to do more of the printing than I have printing capacity to do mode now, and this usually leads to disastrous results for all of my storage space.
Oh, for your storage space. That's like disastrous results. It sounds like it's a good thing. That doesn't sound disastrous, but that makes sense.
First up is I did a resin experiment, and yeah. So I haven't discovered like new wonderful resin, but I have gotten some of my old resin recipes tweaked.
Okay.
And so for the longest time, I've been doing 10% tenacious with Elegoo ABS like.
Right.
Okay?
I know that.
Produces really nice minis. I got one here. You can bounce this off concrete and it's fine. Like,
yes,
if I were to drop this one on purpose, Kristen, is with all the confidence in the world that I've done that 4 times with this one, and it will survive because I'm confident in this resin.
Still don't want you to do it. I still don't want you to do it.
I won't do it. To respect your comfort space, I will not crush this.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
This Ratman, however, no, this one's actually just the same stuff.
Okay.
So I was like, well, if 10% good, 20% better, because a lot of the people that use the Soratec Fast or the Soratec ABS like are having to do 20% to get the same results as the ABS 10% because Soratec is just natively a little bit more brittle.
Yep. Which is what I was doing, by the way.
Yeah. David's gonna throw it at the ceiling for your amusement. No, I won't, David.
I mean, technically, I didn't. It's about to say Toad's different. Yes, I didn't say don't throw it at the ceiling. So he does have a point. You could throw it at the ceiling and still adhere to what you said you wouldn't do for me. So
how lawfully evil.
Yes, that's a really good lawful evil. I mean, because you would know that you'd still be causing the same discomfort. So yeah, we'll call that lawful evil.
Yeah. Well, I was wanting to at least assure you that this Ratman is invincible before I did that. But he's not quite invincible. Like, he can still take a crunch, and so the 20% experiment, I learned 2 things while doing the 20% experiment. 2 things. You're a little bit spoiled on these 2 things. The first thing I learned is that how I used to do the mix was just carefully measuring out the exact amount of tenacious I need into a measuring cup and then pouring it into my Elegoo bottle and shake. And then I have a whole bottle of good resin. So I was like, I always have a ton of space left over. So I tried to do 200 milliliters into that bottle. And you have almost that much space in that bottle.
Almost. Yes.
And tenacious is a real joy to clean up.
I might have experienced just trying to top off the bottle the same way to get the same result. So have I lived your same joyful moment? Yes, I have. And I found that, probably a more accurate, like 18% and just stopping shy of that lip is just fine.
That would do it. That would just do it. Yeah, because that's about it. Because I had about 10 milliliters left in the measuring cup after I made some mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah. But then I shook up the bottle and this glorious gray liquid came out.
Yeah.
That was nice and thin and didn't need to be stirred all that often. It doesn't separate super fast.
That's good.
And dialed in my print settings, which ended up being exactly the same print settings that I was used to using on my Saturn 1, but now that the Saturn Ultra, the Saturn 3 Ultra is so much more powerful that the old print settings make up for it. Anyway, I printed off a whole bunch of new Frost Elves for younger siblings, Northern Viking Army. And they're so good. Oh my gosh. These tiny little thin strand bows. You can just tie a knot in them and pull it. And it's just, If I threw that on the ground, it'd bounce right back up and I could catch it. I mean, these things are so durable and the details on them are so crisp. This is like the absolute Goldilocks zone for resin.
Nice.
Yeah. And now I want to print so much stuff with this because like I was getting a little bit frustrated in my resin journey. And a lot of this is simply because for a little while there, it was really hard to get my like exact mixtures. And I still cannot get the cool green color I want because evidently Elegoo is like really pushing to the 2.0 resin.
Yeah, and they're running out of the mint. They don't have that mint.
Yeah, they're not making like the 1.0 they're making is like gray and black and boring, and I don't yet have it in me to dye my resin myself.
No, I don't either. That's just like one step, one more complexity that I'm like, that'll just be the thing that introduces weird separation into my resin.
Yeah, they're just all going to end up painted anyway. This is one of my favorites.
He's very classic Old Hammer vibes to me.
Yeah, he's Old Hammer vibes. Is what I love about 3D. I don't even remember who made this one. It's like a one-off too. They didn't make very many miniatures.
Gotcha.
They just like did a handful of characters and then stopped making them. But very glorious. And so it's great. So now I have a cool resin recipe until I find more, because I will continue to experiment and play. And
I mean,
I'm still looking for like some cool magic solutions, because I'm so jealous of FDM printer people, because they get to play with new cool color. Like my filament changes colors when I touch it. Mine's made out of wood. Mine has metal engravings on it and destroys my hot end in 2 seconds flat. And it's just like all this very cool stuff you can do with FDM printing, and I get to play around with it. And resin doesn't quite have that. There's some really cool resins out there. There's like, you can actually print bouncy balls. If you want to print resin that has bouncy ball material type tendencies, you can do that. And like, not only would, if I printed this rat out of that, would I bounce it on the floor, I would do so repeatedly because it was exactly what it was made for.
Right. But we're talking about like all the different aesthetic options and the different material stuff.
Like
that's actually what I've been doing.
When you look at them from different sides, they're different colors.
That's exactly what I've been working with this week, because I've been doing props. I mentioned this, and I've got a lot of new filaments for my FDM printer that like from one direction are one color and from the other they're another. And so you get really cool effects when you have a 3D model that's like kind of got a lot of texturing on it. Or if you have like something like a prop, like that's like, like a shield or something, it'll be exterior will be this color and the interior will be this color, even though it's just one piece of filament. But if you have pieces of that are modular, the files get sent to you in different orientations. So you have to figure out how to orient everything so that it still takes advantage of that material.
Right.
And so that's what I've been learning to do this week, is learning how to figure out, okay, this is how this is actually going to print on the plate. How is that going to interact with this material? Because so much of the material stuff is literally baked into the filament, not baked, but it's in the actual formation of the filament. And so if you don't have the right geometry on your print bed, that effect doesn't work right. And that's been a weird learning curve for me to get, because aesthetically you can get something that looks really wrong, even though the print's flawless. Like if you don't have the orientation exactly right. So it might mean taking a piece that normally you can print flat on the bed just great. But if you're using this fancy material, you actually need to take that and put it on supports and turn it sideways and do this whole finagling thing with it that you wouldn't normally be doing with that piece. And that's been an interesting learning curve for me to deal with, for sure. So
what sort of things are you printing with the cool new color change film? Can you not say for reasons?
There are reasons why I can't be too specific. I would say some of it is in the gaming accessory space. Okay. And I would say some of it is in the cosplay space. And I would say
how the cosplay space would work out.
Yeah, and I will say that I can't be too much more specific than that, because there are people who may be watching this that might be benefiting from some of these projects. So yeah, that's as specific as I'm gonna be.
Okay. We have a quick question from Lava Bing in chat saying, Can you resin print dice with bouncy ball resin? You absolutely could. So the thing about bouncy ball resin is it's real soft on the details. Like it's real soft on the details.
That's what I was gonna say. Is
I
the
think
edges and the
dice would
numbers
be okay.
they'd be
You
okay.
might have to clean up the numbers with a scalpel.
Yeah, the polyhedral stuff, like your D10s might be a little wonky. Your dice balance is obviously going to probably be a little questionable. But they're gonna
I
work.
don't know. I think the dice balance would be better than most actual dice because you're not going to have any bubbles.
I reserve judgment. I mean, I guess most resin dice are poured, and so there's a chance of bubbling, and that's fair. But I would imagine printing solid, normal, non-bouncy ball resin dice would still probably give you a better result than printing in the than in the soft, bouncy stuff. It'd be my guess. Maybe I'm wrong because I don't think you're going to get bubbling in normal, just like layered resin dice. The ones I've seen, because a lot of people do those for their masters, and then they make their pour molds off of those. Especially if they're doing like
bubbles. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just saying, yeah, your bubbles aren't until you do the pour later.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, because 3D printing pushes all but like a nanometer of resin out. There's no room for the air anymore.
Right. So
there'd be no bubbles
in either of them. I'm talking about just the general formation of it because I don't think the what is it? Dimensional accuracy is the term we were using would be probably quite as good in that medium, but maybe it would.
Yeah, it might be prone to warpage during
prints
due to peel forces.
I think it would for peel force and just like maybe just a little bit more flexibility in the medium.
Also, I don't want to chase that D20 because like bounce.
I mean, that's the real question, Lava Being. Why do you want a D20 that just keeps bouncing? Who hurt you? Or you give it to an enemy?
Be a really cool gift.
Would it be a mean gift? I don't know. Seems a little twisted. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. The other reason the other thing I've been doing with printing is, in my role at OPR, I often want to send miniatures to people for various reasons. And often need miniatures to give away for obvious reasons, like going to a convention space.
Yep.
So gearing up for a lot of convention appearances that I'm going to have to be doing, like my convention card is like quickly filling up.
So jelly. Go on.
I can get, and we absolutely have done before, just get a print service to print out a bunch of models. Without going into too many specifics, but sometimes it's just easier for me to make the Saturn Go room during work hours, especially since I can do it during work hours.
Well, and you can speak to the process, you can speak to the issues, you can speak to actually having made them. You can say yourself, yeah, I did this with this type of resin and I did that. Like that confidence in your product is going to carry over to like getting those customers to actually like buy it.
The demo I get to do, because like last time I did the demo where I threw the model on the floor on purpose to show that that resin models don't have to be brittle.
Right.
Sorry. Well, I'm sorry that's triggering. It was a model that was made of tough invincible stuff on purpose.
You're good. At this point, it's more of just a dead horse to beat. We're good. Don't worry about it.
Okay. It's not like I was doing the intentional break it montage. That's a different thing. But with anyway, the new resin, that's gonna be even more fun. But like it's amazing how much I can print so fast. Like a plate full of 30 demo models can be done in 3 hours. Yeah. So it's just like super easy for me to just like, I need 100. Okay, sure, that'll be today. And then what do I need tomorrow?
Right.
Yeah. It's just insane how quickly. And just think about this not in terms of me game dude for convention stuff, but like if you're a hobbyist and you're wanting to do a paint and take at your local store, how easy and quick it is to just get a ton of really cool models that you have permissions to give away. Because like, well, even at OPR, we have a set of models that are absolutely free to do with these models to do that with. You could just like have
sensing
this
a
awesome,
segue.
cool stuff.
A segue.
Yes, because like it's important to have a good relationship with your game store if you're a customer, especially if you intend to build a community around it, and if you're 3D printing
Mhm.
a bunch of paint and take models to take to your game store and stuff, then that's great. That's a great way to build community. There's been a topic lately. And I will absolutely acknowledge that I've been thinking about this for a while, but one of the reasons that have pushed this up into the top of my brain is the
Oh.
recent GLG interview with a game store owner about how 3D printing has been affecting game stores, and it was like, I have a lot of thoughts to add to this topic because I'm very into 3D printing. I've run
Mhm.
successful game stores.
Mhm.
I am still deeply involved with other game stores. And
Yep.
a lot of my very, 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 very close friends run game stores, and keep me apprised of the business. And I still help out a lot with some of those stores because of my experience there.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to talk about 3D printing in relation to game stores, because if you're listening to this show, you probably 3D print stuff, or you want to 3D print stuff,
True.
or you make stuff for other people to 3D print, because we have a whole lot of y'all that come into the chat that make stuff for others to 3D print, and you're wonderful people.
Like Scott at
Hello,
Comet
Comet
Lord
Lord.
Miniatures. He's just come into the chat. That was a perfect segue. So many good segues
Yes.
today.
And then you're probably going to want to use this stuff to play with other people. And at least in North America, a lot of community gaming takes place at game stores. Now, I know that this is different in different parts of the world, where parts of Europe, the club scene is like how it's done, where gaming is organized into clubs that appear in public spaces, and game stores often do not have gameplay space. That you go to game stores to buy your games, you play them somewhere else.
Right.
I know that a lot of people play at homes and in personal groups and stuff, but at least in North America, the game store is often where you're going to play a lot of your games. And suddenly that becomes an issue of, how's this game store going to be affected by the fact that we all have magic boxes that make all the toys we want, when we used to buy those toys at this game store? And it's a complicated topic. There's not a lot of like cut and dry answers here.
There's a lot to unpack here for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack here. And first, I want to talk about, just leave this back to the basics of what's it like to run a game store today and recently.
I mean,
and the
mine's
answer
not
is
quite as recent, but I have run a game store for several years.
And the answer is unfortunate. Actually, it is very hard. It has always been hard, but it is still very hard to run a profitable, successful game store. It's hard to run a profitable, successful any business, but when you're talking about retail in today's not in today's economy, the economy is actually also a problem, but just in today's world where Amazon exists and the internet is a great way to order stuff, 3D printing is a part of this question. But before you even get to 3D printing, there is a whole gigantic laundry list of challenges facing any friendly local game store, especially an independently owned small store. You've got companies that sell direct as a primary business model.
Yep.
You have, like, there's so many challenges to running a game store that it is very, very difficult to do. And a lot of game stores will fail very quickly after opening. Like, if they make it to their first year, I am usually shocked. And I hate to say this because I've seen dozens of game stores rise and fall over my tenure. And I can usually tell when I walk into one pretty quickly whether it's going to be around for a while.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
The only thing that ever surprises me is if they
Mhm.
have an online component you're not clearly seeing. If they have an online component, it can distort the physical presence.
Yeah. And I've
But
done that
even
too.
that, yeah.
Yeah. When I ran my game store, we had twice as many employees in the back running our online store as we had in the front running our physical store.
Mhm.
And also, you'll notice that that's an oddity. I said we had multiple employees. Your most
Right.
average game store is going to have a handful of employees, if that, and one of them is going to be the owner. And then you're going to have the other employee that the owner hires so that they can take days off and lunch breaks.
Right.
And sometimes that's it.
Yep. Well, I remember because I even interviewed with GW, and I've never actually ended up working with them, but I did find out that, like, for instance, when we're near the store manager of it, GW, this is freaking GW, you're expected to be the person who runs the store, and you are expected to hire somebody for relief, and you're expected to probably pay them a store credit, which is wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Why I want to also put an asterisk, when we're talking about today, will not include Games Workshop stores or Warhammer stores as they've now been rebranded, because that is a completely different beastie that exists as a marketing arm for Games Workshop. It's not they do not operate under the same rules and expectations as everyone else. Not that they have an easier time. They are just playing a very different game than the rest of the game store people.
I do have a caveat though with that. A caveat for your caveat. Okay, here it is. They still impact the community expectation of your other game stores.
This is true. And I find that mostly benefits the game stores in my area than it hurts them, actually.
I'm going to say yes and no, but we'll get into that, I think, as we go.
Okay. So let's loop back to 3D printing. So the most obvious topic is, how does the fact that 3D printing has become available affect, and therefore people are buying less models, affect the game stores? I will say, like, straight up, probably not a positive. This is definitely another challenge added to the list that they'll need to adapt to. In the total, no, I do not think that it is a statistically relevant change in their behavior, because 3D printing itself is still a hobby. It is still not being adopted by every single gamer. There's still a significant portion of my gaming community that likes the idea of 3D printing and for various reasons does not participate in it. Some people are worried about the health concerns. More people are worried about just having the space to do it. Some people are worried about whether or not they're going to have time to pick up, quote unquote, a second hobby. I have definitely made 3D printing a hobby. I don't think you have to. I think that there is 3D printing as a functional product that does not require you to dedicate yourself to it to the extent that you would call it a hobby.
Right.
The siren song will call to you to do more.
It will. Jay says, I'm not sure it will change for the better. Most aren't set up for print on demand, and customers can print at home. That's money they're not spending at the local store. I am going to agree with all this we've said so far, but I have a second set of information points. We've talked recently about stores that carry, like, official name brand brands like GW, like, Warhammer stuff. Being the GW and other companies like them often do intro stuff where they're trying to get the new customer, the kid, right? And they service whales, right? They service those two extremes. They get the brand new person and the person they've had all along. And
the plan is to get that brand new person, and then later they become the whale.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the intent, right? And once they have the whale's going to buy the stuff. And I find that when someone's a whale in any hobby, it doesn't matter if it's minis, if it's Magic the Gathering or whatever, they want the official product. They want the variant exclusives. They want, like Secret Lair. Secret Lair for Magic is a huge thing. It's a prestige product that people spend tons of money on. And I think the same thing, Warhammer has those convention exclusives that get rebranded, or they're like game store exclusives that are, really, really cool, unusual minis that cost just like a bleeding pound of flesh for just one mini, even sometimes. And I think those things are still going to happen, and as long as the hobby itself is still happening. So we have that. But we also have what Jay says, people can print stuff themselves, right? And they're going to be printing their own stuff. But you're not going to be making your own paint. You're not going to be making your own brushes. You might. That's rare. That is rare. Don't make that face at me.
Okay.
I'm saying that even the average printer hobbyist is not a chemist, is not going to be doing pigments. You're not average. Anyway, I certainly do not make my own paint. Okay. Okay. And I will tell you, I have spent more money buying painting supplies and brushes and terrain materials and basing stuff than I spent on minis most years.
So I was going to leap back to that point. Exactly. I'm going to hold up something here.
Mm-hmm.
This is the entirety of Wave 1 contrast paint.
Mm-hmm.
That was not a small purchase.
No, it was not.
My game store is very happy. I have not spent more. I have definitely not spent less on the hobby because I'm 3D printing. I'm saving money in one aspect that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I'm not the target there because like I don't really play the 40K. I play the OPR and the Frostgrave and the Kings of War and all these games that were very smart and said, "Hey, 3D printing, come play." And like because even if I wanted to, I like participating in communities where I'm welcome. And if I'm in a community where I'm not welcome, I'm just not happy, you know?
Sure.
Like yes, I could do the footwork to carve out a niche in a space for a like-minded community, or I could just go participate in a community that is welcoming and happy to have me, and therefore I'm going to pick that second option.
Right.
And if you're a D&D player, you're happy all the time.
Usually, yeah. I would say though that's part of the things we're not talking about is what is the store's attitude towards 3D printing. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's going to be one of the more critical pieces of this equation for each community.
Mm-hmm. It's a very valid point. Never mind. It was just like
okay. I'm just saying, like, if the store is hostile to 3D printing because they're trying to push their existing minis, for instance, they're going to create a vibe where the tables aren't welcoming it, like, and that's going to be a big issue for, like you said, you're going to pick the community that has that, and so then that store is going to suffer probably for being exclusive to the official mini lines, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I'm finding not a ton of stores are actively hostile to 3D printing entirely. Like I don't mean that there's no stores that are. What I mean is like a lot of stores are either accepting of it or accepting of the inevitability of it or accepting of it in moderation.
Right.
And I'm finding very, very, very few stores that are just like outright, don't bring that stuff in here. And again, obviously, if you only store you have local is a DW store, it's definitely a don't bring your stuff there.
But yeah, that's definitely that
exception. That's a very specific exception to the rule. And like a lot of my local stores are participating in the 3D printing hobby. They have printers. They will print stuff for you. They have merchant licenses. They're participating in it. And also a little bit of the skews for my very, very local stores, nobody around here can afford GW anyway. I'm in a very impoverished area. GW never gets a strong foothold here. Every so often the store tries. It sticks around for a couple of restocks and then they get out because the hassle that getting product from GW, getting stuff from GW is a game in itself because they are very particular with how they sell their product. It's often difficult to get restocks. It's a difficulty and so that extra hassle usually is backed up by strong demand that makes that hassle worth it. But if you don't have that strong demand, they just bounce out of that entirely because you can run a store on Magic the Gathering all you want.
And stocking singles takes up a lot less room, and it's a far easier balance for your profitability, especially like when you go ahead. I was just gonna say you can get nailed by an edition change. So like if you're stocking a bunch of D&D books even, or Warhammer especially, you're going to get that thing where suddenly, if you haven't moved through that first wave release army from this edition, suddenly it's just dead stock because nobody wants those models anymore. And that sucks.
Yeah. Oof, that does hurt. And, but, oof, actually does.
Yeah, it's rough stuff.
But one of the things that if I preached this for a while now, but if you are a good customer to your store and a good community member, they're not going to care. Like if you're showing up at a store and you buy your products from them and you buy your board games from them and you buy your Magic from them, and then you bring your 3D printed army to play games with the gang, that store's not going to have a problem with you because you're a valued member of their community.
If that store's smart.
Yeah, if that store's not smart, dumb stores do not last long in this industry.
They do not. Let's see. Andre McInnes has a question for us. Is anyone else out there in their 50s who bought a 3D printer because they're about to retire? The main reason I did is I couldn't afford retail miniatures when I retire. That is a fascinating answer, and I think that's a great one. I mean, I'm not quite there yet, but I definitely am looking forward to that possibility of just having that 3D printing resource, when I don't have the same expectations on my daily output.
Yeah. And I also don't find that this question isn't even as cut and dry if we're not talking about GW, because you can't afford GW stuff, and making a 3D printer is a great choice because the cost saving is so good if you have a limited income or you have a limited budget or any situation like that. It is indeed a smart hobby to get into in order to continue to enjoy variety and change without basically having to back out the hobby. But I find that that's usually a strictly GW comparison because their stuff is so much more expensive. And yes, there's other stuff at that price range, but they're usually like boutique resin cast one-offs or super, super limited collectibles that you're not meant to buy in such giant quantities. Like the only other popular comparable game I can think of with similar pricing is like Kingdom Death Monster, but that's like a super boutique item that you have to order direct. It's not something you're getting from the game store anyway. But like the second you start playing games like, any of Mantic's games or anything from Osprey like Oathmark or Frostgrave or anything like that, and then the model prices come down so much that like I've even argued that on this very podcast before, that if you want Oathmark spellcasters and you like the look of Oathmark spellcasters, go buy them, because you can technically 3D print them cheaper, but it's such a close, you're under $1 a model. So like at what point does that like the time you spent polishing up the print, which isn't that much, but
would justify the $1. Store-bought is fine. Yeah. Just a quick other thing about they said sorry, the name scrolled away, but talking about the retiring thing, they also mentioned that it's Andre paying for tables at game stores. If you're paying for your table space, should you even have to ask? And I think that is an incredibly valid point. If you're paying for space, then Stufu, like I'm going to play what the hell I want to play at that point. And I think that's a very valid point as well, because there are communities where there's free space if you spent money. That's a common one around here, that people's like, if you spent at least $5 per person at the table, then you can use the space. But if it's an actual table rental, I don't think they should say boo about you playing 3D printed minis.
And that's still anathema to me. Like I understand it, and even as a game store owner could understand implementing policies like that, especially if you had more demand for the space than you had supply for the space. But like of the dozen game stores that I can get to around here with a 2-hour drive, like I have to say 2-hour drive. I know that you, if you live in a better area, it's so much easier to get to them.
Oh my God. I can't even tell you how many game stores I could drive it to within 2 hours. It's dozens.
But none of them charge a table fee at all or have any demands. It's just rock up and drop your stuff and start playing. And the more people doing that, like they're actively encouraging people to do that, because here's the secret. That play space is valuable to the like. There's this conversation that you pay for every square foot, but that play space also has a very valuable part to your game store, because if you do not have a place for people to play the game, if they do not see a future in which they get to play the game, they will not buy the game.
They might buy the game, but they're not going to keep buying the game.
And it is so much easier for me when I was running a game store to sell any given game, like to sell War Machine, to sell Frostgrave, to sell Dracula's West, like random ass games. If all I had to do was say, yeah, every other Thursday they play it, if you want to come down here, and then they will buy. They will buy.
Yep,
they will buy.
Yep. As long as they know there's a community, they can guarantee that. That's true.
Yeah. So I think, so through, and again, like we're kind of like tangenting around the topic a bit, but if and I've seen this happen. I've seen, like, there's the bad version of this. There's the very bad version of this, where somebody rocks up to a game store and they're looking at Be'lakor on the shelf and they're going like, yeah, don't buy that Be'lakor. You can just 3D print it from EMNG's file for like $10. And like, that is incredibly bad form. Like, that is, I would understand anybody getting ejected from the store. And that's not because they 3D printed. That's the same thing as going into a store and like they're trading in their cards and you interrupt the trade to go, oh, he's only going to give you $10 for it. I'll give you 15. And like, yeah, you will get ejected from the store because you interrupted their business.
Right. That's fair.
And that isn't because you play Magic any more than it's because you 3D print. The problem is you were a jerk inside a game store and you deserve to be ejected like any other jerk in a game store.
Yeah.
But like
Andre says they charge $10 for their tables there. That seems like a really reasonable price, honestly.
Yeah, I wouldn't matter. It's like per person or per table? Because if it's per
table, yeah, it's way cheap.
That's stupid cheap. Like occasionally we rent out like library rooms, and that's more than $10 for the day.
Wait, your library charges you for rooms?
If you want to reserve them and have them booked for you, you can go in and request one, and if it's available, you can use it. But if you want to, like, we're planning a game day, we need to know the space is available, we need to book it.
Yeah, you don't have to do that around here. You just have to do it in advance.
Oh. So
I'm sorry, I'm really not rubbing Utah in your face, but for gamers, I guess that's one good thing about Utah. Apparently, it's a very pro gamer state. Yeah, as James,
I need to come visit to see this like wonderful like world of gaming delights.
I mean, there's not a lot others unless you like mountains and nature. If you like that, there's plenty of that here. Otherwise, it's just game stores and
I've got all suburbia. The mountains I need here in Appalachia.
Yeah. Anywho, so we've talked about whether or not the game store is friendly, right? We've talked about, what it might be impacting to their sales. What other aspects of this do you think we should be addressing?
So how does this affect the actual game? Like, what should you be stocking? Let's go into a world in which there's a 3D printing in your game store. How should your game store be organized? Yeah. Okay. Well, like, you're okay with it or not okay with it? We're talking about being a smart business in a world where 3D printing exists. You could be hostile to it and just say no 3D printing showing up at my store. You will antagonize a significant portion of your customer base.
And a very
big that portion
active
and a growing, passionate portion of your customer
very
base.
Passionate piece. Yes.
Yeah. Or you could be smart about it. And this is the same sort of things where I had to these are the same sort of adjustments that any of these stores have had to go to when the internet started to become a thing, when store selling direct became a thing. Like, you have to adjust to the market. Like the fact that your favorite game has a bad edition that doesn't exist anymore, you have to adjust to the market. So this is just doing that again. And so what do you stock? Well, first, stock the Robux, because even if I'm 3D printing the models, I'm going to need the books to play the games.
That's a good one.
So like whatever's popular in their stuff, accessories, paints and stuff, like have a lot of stuff that can't be 3D printed ready to buy, because if I'm a passionate 3D printer and I'm here to play Frostgrave, a game that actively and openly says you can bring whatever the heck you want to play it, or Kings of War, where they actively say this is model agnostic, you can bring whatever you want to play it, that's part of the community. or heaven forbid you've got an OPR group in your area. Okay, but you're going to need paints. You're going to need bases. You're going to need all these supplies to get it going. And a lot of those supplies come at nice profit margins that are easy to maintain.
And one of the things I'm even to tag in on that is that you can also think a little outside the box, because there are non-gaming industry products that still work for all this stuff. Like you can get other primers, you can get other things like that. And I've seen a lot of game stores have success with taking a, let's just say it's like a home improvement primer that's useful, taking that and stocking it alongside their GW primer. Like, I don't want to say like Rust-Oleum, but something like that, right? Where they have like a more generic or more like standard paint thing. They mark it up, and they mark it up significantly, but it's still cheaper than the GW. And so suddenly they have this other option for you that's like, well, you can save $5 and buy your, Rust-Oleum or whatever the hell it is. And now that there are a lot of people are going to make that decision. They're going to buy that thing that's not the branded, just for hobbyists thing. And you can actually make more money on that than you would on the branded stuff, if that makes sense.
My cough button didn't work the one time I needed it.
It did not. No, it did not.
I tested this out 5 times before the show.
You did.
Yeah.
Ironically, I haven't really needed it at all, but anyway.
Yeah. Like having a Rust-Oleum section would be great, because like honestly that's the primer I use. I use $4 cans of Rust-Oleum.
Right. And then the game store marks it up to $8, and you get away with that because it's not 15 or whatever the GW price is, right? Like
20.
Sure. But I'm just saying that's an easy solution for a game store to get a product that's at a much higher profit margin, because I'm not going to go drive to Home Depot if I'm already in the game store and I can just buy the Rust-Oleum there. I'm not going to do it. So
I would also say stock terrain, stock like a good variety of terrain, stock good varieties of the models that are on the cheaper side of things that are not the GW like crazy prices,
right?
Like the North Star stuff, like the stuff, because if you have a resin printing enthusiast, which is kind of the one that is really the one changing the market, the FDM printing enthusiast didn't like come in and disrupt the entire market. Like no disrespect to FDM, it's just that didn't happen at the time.
It's true.
If you resin printing, terrain is tough to resin print, so having cool freaking Battlefield in the Box terrains and stuff, I've bought so much Battlefield in the Box terrain and cool stuff there. Get you some dice, stock your snack section,
yes,
diversify a little bit, get the novels, get the comic books, get all the cool stuff adjacent to it that is just not
posters.
Easily 3D printed.
Yeah,
posters and stuff like that. And yes, also stock the models, because what I can 3D print a bunch of models that kind of look like the Lion, but I can't get Lionel Johnson. I'm going to want Lionel Johnson sometimes. Like I still to this day will buy cool freaking looking models that I think are worth the price they're asking for it, or just because I really want it that badly that I'll pay the stupid price for it.
Right.
Yeah. It's just, you just need to adapt to the market and realize like, hey, this thing is just look at it like any other cause and effect. This thing is not selling as good as it used to. Where can I shift to things that are selling better? Right. And then we also have 2 other things that kind of affect this. And I've noticed this a lot when dealing with local game stores is game store owners like to blame a lot of things for their problems that are not the actual cause of their problems. There are definitely things that might be causing them difficulty.
Sure.
But like digital comics is not the reason your comic books aren't selling.
Right.
Yeah. The fact that Amazon exists is not the reason you're not moving the indie books.
I mean, it might have so many something to do with it, but
they have an impact, but it's not the reason your store is failing.
Right.
Every store that's successful right now is dealing with the same problems you're facing, and I find that unsuccessful stores and stores that are having troubles are the ones that like to complain the loudest about the new technology thing that is hurting them. And it
Yeah.
is just the same knee gut new equals bad nonsense that I'm hearing everywhere else in every other industry. And the
Yes.
truth is, it doesn't matter if it's hurting you. It's the new reality. You need to
Mhm.
adjust to the new reality.
Well, and getting sad and getting upset about it is just going to create a vibe in your play space and your play groups and all that stuff that's just going to drive people away.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And like, definitely people being jerks, you need to police your stuff. So like, do set some policies or set some expectations about, like, hey, don't come into my store telling people not to buy the models on my shelf because you happen to be 3D printing better models yourself, whatever.
right,
Like, that's just bad behavior in general. Don't
right.
come into my store, and do this stuff. You can do that sort of things. You can even set some policies like, hey, if you're showing up to the store, like, only half your army can be 3D printed or something like that. If you want to, I don't think that those are very sustainable policies because you can, they don't, I've seen some stores even try this where you didn't buy that here, you can't play with it here.
Oh God, yeah, that's gonna be hard to
Uh,
enforce. Like,
that's a
what if you weren't
failing. That's
working
a
that day? Yeah.
yeah. And
Ace
like I've even heard.
Kitten,
Uh,
do you see?
mhm.
Sorry, just wanted to call that out. Says selling resin would be amazing. Even an upcharge for an unpreferred brand would beat ordering when I unexpectedly run out. That's facts.
Yeah.
If the store could figure out that hookup, that would be a good one.
Mhm. No joke. Like Micro Center does it, and like a bunch of other stores. Like, if you had a section in your store where you're just stocking Elegoo's and resin and all the supplies needed to do that part of the hobby, and you have print on demand service, like, I know that not every store can do this, but
Right.
having a print on demand service with a catalog would be incredibly valuable to your store
Oh yeah.
because you suddenly are not limited to the 2 different types of dragon you can get from your whatever partner has them in
Right.
stock right now. You
Right.
just now have access to this gigantic array of choices that you can offer your customer, and like have some of them in stock to purchase as demos and stuff like that. And then just like, hey, you want Chaos Beastie number 72 with the 3 dragon heads? Oh, you want yours with this specialty option? Come back tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Come back tomorrow, or maybe 2 days, depending on the print shop. But probably at this point,
Mhm.
most of them tomorrow.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not saying that 3D printing is going to absolutely 100% replace physical models in the world, but it's definitely going to continue to grow in this hobby. It's definitely going to continue to grow its impact. We're seeing uh more and more people selling 3D prints as their primary means of manufacturing. Even like Privateer Press is the easy one to point to, but like
Right.
you've got Titan Forge and other companies doing the same thing.
Hmm.
It's just part of the landscape now, and just putting your fingers in your ears and your head in the sand and chasing people out that are embracing the technology is just a great way to lose customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think there's an aspect of this we haven't really talked about it yet.
Oh,
Let's say you're one of us. You're a
uh-huh.
3D printer. You're a fanboy. You're a hobbyist. You're
Yeah.
an enthusiast. You're a
Hmm.
community center. What
Hmm.
can you do to help bring your stores into the alignment with the stuff that you would want? Like, how can you do that? Like, and I can think of a couple things I've done that have been really helpful. I don't know about you. Do you
Hmm.
want me to go ahead with what I've done so far?
Sure.
Well, fortunately, we had the show, so I have a little bit more connectivity than a lot of people. But I reached out to some of our partners from the show, some of the people who've interviewed on it, and I got permission to print to print. That was promote and print in one word, permit. Anyway, to print some paint takes, and then I approached a bookstore slash game store that doesn't have minis. This was a weird
Mhm.
thing, but what I was able to do was say, "Hey, you don't have this in your space. It's something really important to the people who play here. They bring minis, they do all this stuff, they're using maps. What if I did the, paint and tank for you?" And so I
Mhm.
was able to bring 3D printing into a space that didn't even have minis and enrich that community. And I taught painting classes. I did a whole bunch of different things to help kind of build a couple different activities. And it's been a really rewarding relationship. That store will do almost anything for me now and will definitely support the hobby and welcome 3D printing into their play space. and they have 3 game rooms, and even times ad hoc an extra game room out of one of their sales rooms sometimes. So like that's a huge win for our community as 3D printers. Have you had any experiences where you've been able to like be an emissary for the hobby?
Yeah, I've done the paint and take thing. I've done the thing is like I already have very, very strong, good bonds with almost all of my local stores.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where I didn't have to have that fight, or I didn't have to do any
That's fair.
convincing. But the key here is if you are a positive force in your local community, it is easy to influence that community. Just as it's think of this just as getting your favorite games played or getting people building up a group around anything like just like building up a group of people, like say you want to play Frostgrave, so you build up a local Frostgrave community. You're an ambassador to Frostgrave. If you are a 3D printing enthusiast and you are also a good community member, it's easy to influence acceptance and responsible use of the 3D printing product in your space. And because that you are for a person that cares about your space, you will hopefully do so responsibly in ways that benefit the space and doesn't detract to that space, if that makes any sense. So like it's all about just building good communities and growing good communities and being a benefit to your local stores and your local communities. It makes it easy to shape them the way that you hope they will be shaped. I mean, you can do this in a very cynical way of, aha, yes, I've integrated myself into the game store. They trust me now. In comes the resin. But in reality, it's just doing your fair part as a community member is all that really matters there. Hosting events, like showing up with, showing up with armies that people can play with at game days, so that if they didn't bring their own, that's a fun way to do it. Showing up and like bringing a whole bunch of 3D printed terrain, or giving a bunch of 3D printed terrain to a game store that doesn't have any terrain. Again, make sure you do so with stuff you have permission to do that with. Either you've got a merchant license or stuff that's fine with it. Some manufacturers are just chill with it. It's just adding stuff to the space and benefiting your space and helping to grow your space. You will find that it's easier and you will not have that friction. Whereas I think where you will have that friction is if you come in and all you're doing is taking from that space. Are you showing up to play at a game store that and you're showing up and you're giving nothing to that game store? You're doing nothing to that community. Like there's people in my communities that we find very valuable members of the community who can't afford to buy stuff every time they show up. And like, like I said, it's an impoverished area, but they're good ambassadors. They're chill people to play with. They aren't acting like jerks and they understand the situations. But if all you do is show up with negative energy and take from a space and draw on their resources, and like it doesn't take 3D printing to get you kicked out of that space. You're just going to be not welcome soon anyway. But you definitely can cause damage and collateral damage along the way. I guess like all things, this all boils down to, we are talking about social spaces and social games. The fact that this has to do with gaming does not change any of that. Be a good social cause for good in your area, or else you're going to have a bad time.
Wheaton's Law. Don't be a dick.
Fair enough.
Let's see. Lava Being says, do merchant licenses include any sort of affiliate benefits to LGSs if someone buys directly from the vendor directly? I don't think I've seen that, really.
Never seen any of that, no.
Honestly, it's such a low bar of entry to potential profit, Lava Being. I don't know that they need to extend that, because if you get like a good print setup and a good print farm setup, basically, you're going to be making plenty of money on those products. Plenty, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like a merchant license is like on average like what, $30 to $50, mostly in the 30 camp.
Yeah, usually if that, sometimes even just 20. Yeah.
And if it's for one of the popular vendors, then it's super easy to, like, if you just got good high quality product, it's easy to move it.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people that just do 1 or 2 Patreons and have the merchant tier, and they just do those prints. And they do them really well, and they do great.
Mm-hmm. Good Lord. There's so many Etsy stores that's exactly their model. They have 1 or 2. Like one of my favorites, War Chest Creations, just has like Highlands and Artisan Guild. I forget which 2 they have. It's just like it's the only 2 they have, but they're always moving it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think we've kind of. Is there anything more on this topic you want to talk about? I think we did our usual random bounce.
Yes, usual neurodivergent rambling rants. Yeah, I don't think so. Other than I know this is a challenging time of change for our communities, and I think like you said, lead with service and kindness, and just trying to be there for your people. And I think people will come around and welcome 3D printing or not. Just I think there's a lot that can be done to make these spaces more positive and less divisive lately, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I
will
will say, if you find yourself,
sorry, I'm skipping ahead.
I still say if you walk into a space and you're just very much not welcome there, just get out of that space.
Yeah. If the vibe isn't vibing, it's just like any other game. D&D group is like super hostile because they don't want you to play an Owlin. Don't go play with that D&D group. The Magic the Gathering group is only CEDH, and they want to play 9 tier decks. Then peace out. Find something else. Use Spell Table. Go play with people online. Whatever it is, you can find a group that vibes.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
So fun shout outs. I'm going to shout out to a YouTube video that I watched this week. It's a weird one, but this is from Hodgepodge Hobbies, a very small YouTube channel with 582 subscribers. But very nice production quality on the video, so I don't expect them to stay that way very much longer. Put out a video called "The Newest Way to Make a Wargaming Board." And overall, it's pretty basic stuff that you're used to if you've watched any like Geek Gaming Scenics putting together a board. They're building a Lord of the Rings board. It's really awesome looking, and like I'm always jealous of these like made out of foam and plaster boards because they look so good. They're just so impractical to store, which is why I don't have a dozen of them by now. But they use 3D printing in a really creative way for making this board that's worth watching the video to get inspired of like non-standard uses of 3D printing, where they made like templates. Like they're going to make this board out of foam and dirt and resin and all the normal stuff you're used to, but they made like these 3D printing templates to like perfectly measure out exactly where everything's going to be and exactly how the river segments were going to be laid out, and so they could space and cut all the foam so that it would exactly fit out. And then like 3D printed the rock texture inserts instead of casting them out of plaster, and like lots of really fun uses of 3D printing in ways I haven't seen before that's supplemental. Like you're not 3D printing the terrain. In the end, they actually do 3D print a bunch of houses, but that's not the gist of the board.
Right.
But like 3D printing is a template, 3D printing is a tool, 3D printing is gribbly bits to slap on here. A fun way to like elevate traditional craft and accessorize traditional craft like we've talked about before in a way I've never seen before. So go check out Newest Way to Make a Wargaming Board by Hodgepodge Hobbies. It's kind of an inspiring little video, and it's well made, and he makes a really cool looking I think Dougal Dorn inspired board.
Dougal Dorn? Do you have a picture of it? No, I'm just curious. If not,
I do not have a. I can share a screenshot of the video.
I mean, you got me excited, so
Okay,
I'm curious.
I can just 1 second, and then here. Yeah. And you can see it's got it's really nice looking stuff, and like here's some of the 3D printed rocks, and here's some of the templates that he's using. Like it's like this little wedge shape that's the exact curve he needs for that river so that it will match up with the other tile when they're pressed together.
Right.
It's like all very smart stuff, and like stuff printed with FDM and like custom made, and like this is very clever use of 3D printing that I haven't seen before in gaming. And so I wanted to shout this out. Like, wow, you surprised me. You made something really awesome.
Yeah, very, very cool. My shout out is to something very small. Also, this is interesting. We're doing very small. I sent you the link for it. Everybody knows that as much as I like tentacles, one of my favorite things in D&D is beholders. Eye kings, eye tyrants. I like beholders a lot. And I noticed this little Kickstarter. There's literally 3 minis. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $7 for the early bird. But it's 3 minis, tiny creator in the UK. They're just little, like 2 of them are kind of cute, but the third one's just very unique. That last one there, that guy. Never really seen that design for a beholder. I think it's really neat. I think it's just a tiny little project that deserves a little attention. He's already made his goal, so the minis, and you can tell by the images that these are already sculpted, right? This is a done deal. But I just think it's interesting, and there is something to be said for creators that are just doing little micromanaged products like this. This probably could have been like a Make 100, but just a tiny, very reasonable little project to get him started, maybe build some confidence. And I just think it deserves a little attention. And it's beholders, which I love. So
yeah, this is Flying Eye Monsters.
Yes, just on the edge of please don't sue me. Right,
by Tabletop Games.
Yep. But I thought it was a worth looking at. So.
Oh wow! And with that, do you have another shout out? Because
we are at time. That's okay.
Yeah. And with that, we will see you all next week. If you want to support the show, the best way you can do that is leaving us a review on Spotify or iTunes, or if you're watching us on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Especially that comment part. It helps to spread the show to more eyes and ears. If you want to find more, you can find us over at printyourgames.com, where you find all the previous episodes and links to the socials and the doodly-doos. And until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery, and don't forget to use your screen protector.